If you want a reliable, well-mannered, and affordable new car, you have a few options. But if you want one that goes above and beyond what's required, Mazda consistently delivers, if you can get over some of their quirks. So today I'm going to go over those drawbacks while giving you a detailed reliability report and showing you exactly why they are my favorite brand. I know car reviewers love to preach the name of Mazda like the brand single-handedly solved their marital problems, but that's for good reason, and the people that own them typically have positive experiences. Now, no matter what brand you look at, there's always going to be some lemons, some common issues, so let's go over those and the overall reliability. The information provided will be coming from a variety of sources, including Consumer Reports, Cars.com, owners forums, NHSTA reports, service bulletins, and even a Mazda service department. Now I'm going to start off with some things that Mazda was more widely known for in the past. Some of these have lingered on for quite some time. Body rust and some underside corrosion too in certain areas is not new to the brand. You'd see this a lot on old Miatas, especially the NBs, at least from my personal experience. I used to have an 05 Mazda 3 and the same thing happened there. And this was a pretty consistent issue for people in northern climates, but it seems that they fixed this around the 2009 to 2012 era, as reports have steeply dropped. Though exterior protection has not always been great after that, as the paint they use is also known to chip pretty easily. Recently I did a video with Zach Pradel from Shooting Cars, and his got completely peppered with rock chips to the point where he often rocks a car bra. Personally, if I was buying a new Mazda, I'd put some paint protection film over the most vulnerable areas. Something else that personally affected me with my old Mazda 3 was motor mounts. So this can cause a pretty substantial vibration, and it seems like they used to fail in a couple of different ways. Mine personally had hydraulic fluid leak out of it, and it also seems like cheap stock brakes have been the culprit for a lot of other people's qualms with their Mazdas. And this is something that's not really limited to just one part of the brake system. I've seen that reported on current generation Mazdas as well.
The old 3.7-liter Ford engine in the Mazda CX-9 also had a notorious design that meant if the water pump leaked, it would mix coolant into the engine oil. It also seemed to cause problems with the timing chain. That wasn't extremely common, but I'd still be cautious around these.
Now, I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole of minor things that have happened to specific models, though I will go over some of the more widespread things, like CX-5's having a daytime running light failure. This can be a very expensive replacement. This was on the previous generation cars, so it's something that I would only worry about if buying used. Another big problem was just the CX-7's engine. So again, this is used. They had a lot of timing chain issues that would cause a multitude of problems, and then there was turbo failure as well. That engine was a 2.3-liter turbocharged inline-4. It was also shared with the Mazda Speed 3 and Mazda Speed 6, though it seems like those had suffered less issues, which could just be attributed to more regular oil changes. Early models of the second-gen Mazda 3 also suffered from clutch failure with, of course, the manual transmission. And some other cars have been known for transmission issues too, like the ND Miata in the first few years of the generation had some catastrophic failures. This was a known weak point for the car that has been addressed. It usually happened when the car had more power, but sometimes it even happened when stock. There are also some very isolated reports of bearing issues or transmission or differential whirring noises that could also result in some expensive repairs there with the 6-speed automatic.
Something that the Mazda techs at Royal South added was that some 6-speed autos have developed a chirp while shifting. The cause is unknown, so the current fix is to replace the transmission. This is an issue they've encountered firsthand with the current gen CX-5, but glancing at Consumer Reports does ease my mind, as it's not something that's common enough to register there. In fact, even though what I'm sharing today are issues that are corroborated by owners, most of these are just problem areas, not things that you need to brace for.
Now, the most notorious problem as of late was actually more specific to a large batch of 2.5-liter turbocharged engines. This was concentrated around the 2021 model year, and we saw high amounts of oil consumption due to failing valve seals within the engine. Outside of that model year in specific, the 2.5 turbo and the regular 2.5 have been durable engines. There are some other weak points across the board, like air conditioning that's been known to be finicky in some models, like the Mazda 3 again. Though I do want to mention this is nowhere near as serious of a problem as it has been with some Hondas. There are There are also some complaints about long-term quality with the interiors. Like with the MX-5, people have leather kind of wearing off in some high traffic areas. Some other models develop interior rattles. I know the Mazda 3 in specific had some owners have to replace the screen for various reasons.
Something that the service department said was much more common on the previous setups and touchscreens.
Though these aren't problems that every owner runs into, whereas they have had some other larger recalls, like things pertaining to the airbags that can actually cause a light to pop up. Then we also had a lot of fuel pump problems that resulted in a recall as well on newer Mazdas with the 2.5 liter. Though I would like to try to clear up some things on the cylinder deactivation. I get so many hate comments related to this because a lot of people have been shivved by companies like GM, Dodge, or even Honda with this technology, though Mazda has not suffered the same kinds of problems.
When it first came out, there was a sizable recall on it that required a reflash of the powertrain computer, but I haven't heard of any lingering mechanical issues from cylinder deactivation.
Something that's a more valid concern related to it is the technical service bulletins that have been uploaded for the 2.5 liters with cylinder deactivation, but you need to keep in mind, this is something that's on most of the naturally aspirated engines put out in the last 4 or 5 years from the company. And while some of these TSBs do state that owners have run into deactivation malfunctions, I think there's like over 1,000 technical service bulletins on the Mazda 3 alone. So if we're looking at the data, I really can't call this a problem. I see more complaints coming from people who feel that it has an unrefined way of kicking in, though that too is kind of a debated subject. It seems like some driving habits cause certain people to have more complaints with it. But after confirming all of this with the friendly service team over at Royal South Mazda, that's not something that they're really running into. There are more consistent reports with infotainment bugs, backup cameras, and finicky autonomous braking that in rare occurrences sees things that aren't there. One piece of maintenance that I would really keep in mind is fuel induction services, which helps keep the intake valves clean, as all the new Mazdas use direct injection only, so carbon buildup can occur. Now the 2 liter from the Miata especially, but the 2.5 liters as well, have been very reliable engines. The transmissions are also built in-house by Mazda in Japan, and they're typically robust. I've been researching reliability for a while now, and whenever I come across Mazdas, they're pretty consistently reliable vehicles. Now, because I don't want to spend a bunch of time on the RX-8 in particular, we're gonna leave out the rotary engine and its failing apex seals. While the longevity is a big proponent, there are a multitude of other reasons why this is my favorite brand. So let's get into that, and then I'll talk about the beef that I have with Mazda. So the thing that I enjoy about Mazdas the most on a very consistent basis throughout the lineup is how they handle. A lot of that comes from the steering. So they don't use a super quick ratio, which means that these cars are not darty when you turn the wheel in, but they remain very tight. There's very little play on center. And with a lot of competitors, you'll also find that as you're going through corners, they don't build up in their steering weight in a way that is particularly engaging. Drive something like this Mazda CX-5 and then go drive a RAV4 and you'll know what I'm talking about. It helps this feel more alive and predictable as well. And with the newer CX-30s, 50s, and 90s, the steering is a little bit on the heavy side, but overall it has a very reassuring feel on any sort of road. And they typically spring their cars on the firm side for their relative segments, giving them better handling, a little bit less body roll than average.
Though the MX-5 is notably soft for a performance car.
Building on top of that, most of the new interiors are well above the class average in luxury. They use soft touch materials in most areas. They have analog controls, satisfying buttons and dials, and in the CX-5 in particular, I think the build quality is great for the money. Some other models like the CX-30 may have some panel gaps, little details that hint at the car's price tag, but for the most part, there's a wow factor to the cabin when you consider all that you're getting for sometimes less than $30,000. And that's the next thing that I love about them is the price. This doesn't apply to every model. Things like the Mazda 3, I think, are cannibalized by the CX-30, which comes with a little bit more practicality, a similar cabin, all-wheel drive, all at basically the same price. But overall, especially with cars like the new CX-90, you consider the amount of luxury that you're getting there, the powertrains and the handling, it's impressive. You also have the driver-centric infotainment that can be a little polarizing, but the control dial rests exactly where my hands do, and it makes these cars great for people that aren't buying their vehicles because they want the latest and greatest technology. They just want something that easily plays their music or can run their navigation. There's also the fantastic Bose audio systems, and then we have the powertrains. There's no continuously variable transmission, which you know, is fine for a car that's appliance-like, but the traditional, slow shifting but smooth 6-speed automatics much better suit the image and the personality of most of the Mazda products. There's also standard all-wheel drive on many of their models, which further adds to the value proposition as you won't have to pay extra for it.
And with models like the Mazda 3 or CX-30, the base 2.5-liter engines provide some of the best acceleration in their respective classes, which isn't really saying a whole lot. However, they also offer a responsive turbocharged version on top of that.
That usually provides you with good acceleration but excellent passing power. It's a highly refined power plant.
And if you want to further the silky torque, you can up the thread count to the 3.3-liter inline-6 here in the US. This is only available in the CX-90, but I'm sure we will see it elsewhere soon. I will admit I'm not a huge fan of how that engine's 8-speed wet clutch transmission operates at low speeds.
But with some of those pros, there's going to be some inherent drawbacks, and the brand is particularly stubborn on certain things that I think kind of limit their appeal. So one, I think they can make some frustrating decisions. For instance, instead of redesigning the Mazda CX-5 and giving it a little bit of bigger back seat and maybe a slightly more comfortable ride, improving the seats, they made a new model called the CX-50 that does those things for the most part, but then it also loses out on some of the build quality and unique features that the CX-5 had to offer. So now they have two cars with slightly different ideals that compete very closely with one another. But even though the CX-5 wildly outsells the CX-50, its future does not seem to be guaranteed. And I also think that the Mazda 3 may meet its demise as they keep eliminating cheap options for it. I mean, the standard hatchback for 2024 comes in at a well-equipped yet still high $27,000.
Mazda also tends to lack on practicality when compared to their versatile competitors.
So like with the CX-90, you get a lot for what you pay for, but a lot of people buying cars in that class want a little bit more practicality for something as large as it is. And trying to get luxury car buyers to jump ship to a Mazda is extremely difficult. They could almost benefit from creating a separate premium brand at this point, but that's a video for another day. Not to mention the infotainment system, while I like it, is pretty oversimplified, may require some extra steps in order to do certain tasks, and by nature, as it's primarily controlled through the dial, it'll spook some people, but not near as much as the visibility in some models like the Mazda 3 hatchback or the CX-30. They feel very closed off and to some claustrophobic, which when I talk to any Mazda sales team members is a big reason why people walk in and immediately walk out. The back seat can also have the same effect. A lot of their models have smaller back seats than their competition, and when you're competing for people who are looking for sensible cars, that's a pretty notable drawback.
And Mazda's driving aids have been lagging behind lately. I may not care about this personally, but a lot of people do. You'll have adaptive cruise and lane departure prevention standard on most, but they usually limit lane centering to the highest trims only, and even then, unless we're talking about the CX-90 Turbo S, it doesn't work past 40 miles per hour. Lastly, it would be nice if they could offer some more hybrid options. Overall, if you don't demand a ton of interior space or tech, I would make Mazda a go-to brand the next time you start test driving cars. There's a few reasons why they don't have the broad appeal of Toyota, Honda, or even Subaru, but if you give them a chance, you may be impressed. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button to help me sneak up on the YouTube algorithm. Subscribe and hit the notification bell for more, and follow me on Patreon for an additional podcast. I'll catch you in the next one.